Hello, and welcome to Ironwood AI's orientation videos. This is part one, and we're going to have a part two orientation video for folks that will be joining our weekly Zoom advisory calls. And these videos are designed to help you just get caught up so that you can participate effectively. And we're going to be covering some of the basics so that you know the basic terminology and are not lost in some of the things that we're talking about. My name's Eric Holter. I am the co-founder and CEO of Ironwood, and this is my son, Adam.
Hi, I'm Adam, co-founder and CTO of Ironwood.
And these videos, they're meant to help you just get caught up. There's so much going on in AI, and there's so many changes that are happening that if you're just joining in one of our groups and you're starting from scratch, then there's a lot of catching up to do. So that's what these videos are intended to do. We are going to be covering today just the basic concepts. What is AI? How is it different from other kinds of technologies? Why is it making such a difference? We're going to talk about just the general concept of what AI is in general. And then we're going to talk about what the main types of AIs are, because when you say AI, it covers a lot of ground. So we're going to be talking about what are the main ones we're talking about here, and then some of the players. So you have at least a familiarity with the landscape. And then in the second video, we're going to be talking about some terminology, some key terms and definitions that you should be aware of. We're going to be talking about some of the more recent advancements. Of course, that changes pretty quickly by the time you're watching this. We're recording in April of 2025. So whenever you're watching this, things may have changed quite a bit. But as of today, some of the more recent advancements in AI, and then just some basic concepts, ways you need to think about AI. So in terms of getting started, let me just talk a little bit about how we got into this. Actually, Adam, why don't you share your story about when you started following AI and how you got into it?
Yeah, so I learned about ChatGPT a little bit after it had come out in early 2023, and I just learned everything that I could about it. And mid-journey, back then it was like GPT 3.5 was the best thing around. Everybody was using it. And so from there, I just started learning how to use it very well, and then I started sending out emails, seeing if I could help other businesses with AI. And I did an internship with a company called Guided Impact, where I helped create social media content for them using ChatGPT. And then after that, I started getting into consulting with clients such as Sojourn Digital. And from there, I built the content generator, which is one of Ironwood's products. And then we founded Ironwood.
Yeah. And if you're not already following Adam on LinkedIn, you really should. He really does consume all the news, tests all the new models, posts on LinkedIn more than often more than once a day on some of the things, and things really do change that quickly. These videos are meant to be a little bit more basic, though. We're trying to make these evergreen, useful for anybody just entering. Maybe it's only been in the last weeks or months that you've been saying to yourself, I need to get this stuff figured out and figure out what's going on and how to use it. And that's what these videos are designed to do. And so to start that off, I just want to talk about the big picture. What is AI? And Adam had mentioned, when he first heard about AI, we were both at the same lunch, and our friend Matthew Miskevich, he actually was an engineer in computer science, and he studied neural networks when he was in college, which is what AI is. And he was telling us about this, and I remember at first just being super skeptical, like, oh yeah, okay, I guess taking pieces from one part of the internet and another part of the internet and combining it and making it something new. I was like, I don't really believe it's all that much. But then when he actually showed me what it was doing and explained exactly what was going on, it made me realize this is something fundamentally different. So here's the basic difference. Up until AI, and AI has been doing this for a long time, but in the last couple of years, it's hit mainstream. Um, Computer technology, programs and applications, they were algorithmic. A programmer had to write code, decision trees, logic, and basically make software do what the software engineer wanted it to do. And it was manually coded, and it did exactly what you called it to, coded it to do. AI is different. Essentially, with AI, you're building a brain. So I don't know technically how this works, but you create a digital set of neural pathways, just like our brains have these neural networks and pathways, trillions of them. So too does a digital brain have all of these connections. And you create the brain, and then you start to train it. And so you start to ask this brain to display something or write something, and it just starts with just giving you random output, and you say, no, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. And eventually it shows you what you're looking for, and you say, yes, that's it. And a neural pathway is established, and it keeps doing that. So these AIs are essentially neural networks that have been trained. And once the training is complete, the neural pathways essentially think or process information the way that our brains do. And this is why if you put something into ChatGPT or if you put a prompt into an image model, it'll generate different content every time because it's kind of making it up as it goes along. It's also why so you may have heard of hallucinations, that an AI might make something up and it might be wrong, because just like our brains sometimes get something wrong, so too these neural networks, they're coming up with original answers, and they sometimes make mistakes. That's why they sometimes hallucinate. I think, Adam, you've once compared it to like the way that autocomplete works, where it's just trying to predict what it ought to say
Mm.
next.
Yeah, it's trying to predict basically the next word. And when you have to predict the next word from the entire internet, you have to understand the text to do that very well.
Right, right. So it's like autocomplete, but on steroids. You're basically, it's predicting what it needs to do and then filling in the blanks. And that's what makes it completely different. We're not talking about things that were coded and made by people to process information in a very specific way. It's just literally a thinking brain. And you can't really backwards engineer it either. Like if it does create a hallucination, there's no way to go back and say, well, let's look at the code and see what happened and why it came up with that. It doesn't have code. It has a brain. It has been fed in massive amounts of information, and then trained. And then once it's trained, the information's not in it, and it's just using its own brain to come up with these answers. So it's quite different from any other kinds of technology that we've used in the past. And now that it's hit mainstream and these brains have gotten so smart that they can do the kinds of things that AI can do, that's what's creating such a disruption. That's what's so new, and why everybody has to get caught up with this new world of AI and how to use it effectively. So that's what we're going to be talking about. Before we dive in, though, let's give you a bigger picture. When we say AIs, again, it covers a lot of ground. So there are language AIs, LLMs, large language models. That's one, and that's probably the one you've heard about the most, the Chat GPTs. And we're going to be talking about the different players in a minute. But ChatGPT is obviously probably the most popular one. But there are more than just LLMs. There's image models, so that you can create images just from natural language prompts. And again, it's just making these images up out of its brain. It's not looking for sources and recombining them. It's just making these images up. There's also audio AIs, where you can generate speech from text or music. There's video AIs that are creating video. Some really amazing stuff's going on with video AIs. And then there's more than just these main four. There's AIs that do specialized things like genetics or 3D modeling or robotics. Like there's tons of AIs all over the place, but the big four, the ones that we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth today, are the LLMs, image models, audio models, and video models, and mostly focusing on the LLMs, the language models, and the image models for the most part. Audio and video are things, most of our clients probably aren't going to use, although in some aspects that they will. So, Adam, why don't you start to work through the LLMs? Who are the main players in the LLM space? And if you can give us a little bit of differentiator between them, of course that
Mm.
might change, right? Because they leapfrog each other
Mm.
constantly. But
Mm.
give us the list and tell us a little bit about what's different about each one.
So the biggest one is OpenAI's ChatGPT, which you've probably heard of. Then there's Anthropic's Claude, Google's Gemini, Grok from XAI, China has DeepSeek, and then there's Perplexity, which doesn't really make their own models, but it's a platform that uses other models in a sort of a different way.
Mhm.
So ChatGPT was the first to market. They got there late 2022 in November. And ever since then, they've pretty much been at the frontier, state of the art. Other models have maybe beat them in a few areas, but ChatGPT is never far behind. They're generally the first to come up with some new innovation like reasoning, things like that. They've been the industry leader. And they have a memory feature in their platform, so it can learn about you throughout your chats, make specific memories when it picks up information as you're talking to it, and that can make it more of a custom assistant for you,
Mm.
which makes it pretty
That's something to
helpful.
keep in mind too if you're using it, unless you're telling it not to remember or you do a temporary chat, it's keeping track of everything you ask it, right? So it's learning about
Yeah.
you. It's working, yeah.
hmm Another thing in ChatGPT is that you can make custom GPTs, which have their own instructions and tools and things like that. So that can help you customize it for specific tasks.
hmm hmm And another thing to keep in mind is as you're describing the difference between, say, ChatGPT and you'll go into some of the others next, it gets even more complicated than that, right? Because ChatGPT itself has multiple models, right? There's 4.0, there's O3 mini, and multiple types even of those. So you have to start to understand not just that there's different language models out there, but each one has different models, and those models do different things. We're not going to go into the details on a call like this, on the video like this, but just to be aware that it gets even deeper in the weeds because each of these major players has their own model, multiple models.
Hmm. So then one of the other major players is Claude from Anthropic, and it's got some different strengths. Like it's really good with matching writing style. Uh, it's preferred for coding. It's a lot better at coding than ChatGPT. Developers prefer it.
Hmm.
And Anthropic emphasizes safety and security, so your data isn't going to be trained on by their model by default.
Hmm.
You can opt out in ChatGPT, but Claude isn't going to train on your data, even on like the free tier. You don't need to opt out. It's just not going to do it.
Mm. And
So it's
that's
going to make
kind of
it safe.
important because some of our clients are lawyers, and if you are doing general research, you could probably use whatever tool you want. But if you're actually creating documents or uploading documents, working documents, case files, you have to make sure those are kept private and secure. So you wouldn't want to just dump that into ChatGPT without opting out of memory and so forth. Whereas with Claude, you pretty much could, right? Because they're keeping everything private right out of the gate.
Mhm. So then Google, of course, they're the big tech company. They have their own AI, and that's Gemini. And Gemini is like cheap and fast, and it generally keeps pace with OpenAI, but they're the most aggressive about taking your data and doing whatever they want with it. You are the product with Gemini, as with all Google products.
Yeah, so you don't want to be just jumping stuff into Google unless you're perfectly fine having them use it however they want to, right?
Mhm. So then there's Grok from XAI. It's a really good base model. It's well trained, more capable than a lot of other models in general. It's also very fast and it can search X for real-time information. So it can understand the discourse around something and give you real-time information rather than just telling you what it already knows about. And that's very helpful.
hmm And we're going to talk about that concept in the next video that when
Mhm.
an LLM is trained, it's sort of stuck in that time point. It doesn't know what's happened after the point at which it's completed its training. So we'll go into more detail on that in the next video.
Mhm. So then there's DeepSeek, and DeepSeek is open source, which means anybody can download and run it on their own device if you have the resources. And they're also very cheap. And they're from China, so if you're using it on their own platform, all of your data is going straight to the CCP.
Yeah.
So if you're going to use DeepSeek models, they are good, they're open source. So just don't use it on their own platform if you care about your data security at all.
Yeah, good to keep in mind for sure.
Mhm. So then there's Perplexity, and Perplexity is a platform where you can use multiple different models. They have their own fine-tuned versions of some open source models. But really, what it is a research tool. And it takes these other base models, like you can use Claude models and ChatGPT models in Perplexity. And what it lets them do is go out, research the web. It can do some deeper searches, and it's just very good in general for accurate searching with citations. So you can find out where it got that information, so you can fact check it. And that's very helpful if you're doing actual research and you need to make sure it's accurate.
Yeah, that kind of citation piece does help you have more confidence that it's not hallucinating, that it's actually genuinely giving you the information out there. There is one more. We've talked about OpenAI, Anthropic, Claude, Google's Gemini, Grok, DeepSeek, and Perplexity. Google has one other tool called Notebook LM, which is not it's not really its own AI. I guess it sort of kind of is, but it's something to be aware of because what you do with Notebook LM is you can upload your own sources. Those could be links of website sources, your own documents, Google Documents, PDFs, videos, audio files. You can dump anything into your notebooks and then query what your own content contains. And it's kind of a similar thing with Perplexity. It actually documents exactly where it found it in your own resources. So you can find out where in your notes and files and resources. And it's got this really crazy feature where for each notebook, it creates a little like podcast summary of what all of these notes are about. And there's these two voices that go back and forth. And honestly, they sound just like real people. Like the first time I heard a podcast of a Notebook LM, I literally thought it was two people talking to each other. And I'm like, this is weird, but it's completely auto generated. And recently they have a feature where, as they're giving you the podcast, you can interrupt it and pipe in and ask the hosts a question or redirect them, and they'll take
Mhm.
that in. It's kind of mind blowing. But
Yeah.
yeah, so Notebook LM is another neat tool in the language model space. It's not exactly a model, but something to just be aware of.
Mhm.
So let's talk now about, so we talked about these are all the LLMs. Uh, Image models are another big category. And just, we want this video to be evergreen, to be helpful to anyone just entering, months from now, probably not years the way things go, but um, with LLMs, most likely the players we just talked about are going to be the players that we're talking about a year from now. They'll have new tools and new models and so forth, and that's what our ongoing weekly calls deal with, kind of keeping everybody up to speed with the changes. Um, Image models, we're going to review a bunch now, but they do change quite a bit. They leapfrog each other quite a bit. In fact, as we were originally writing our scripts for putting together this video, we had a couple players, set differently because um, that was the case as we were writing the script, and then the very day that we finished the script, we had to change it because new capabilities were literally released that day. So within image models, things change quite a bit. But I'll let Adam go through the list of who are the main players, at least as of today, and what differentiates them at the moment from each other.
Mhm. So OpenAI, they've got their finger in all the different pots for AI. So they've got their image generation models. They used to use Dolly, which wasn't very good, but recently they updated to this native image generation, which is what dropped while we were writing this. And it's very good for things like creating text in images, diagrams, and things like that, and image editing. So that's built into ChatGPT and on their Sora platform, which we'll review. So I can show so Midjourney was the first to market in terms of image generation. They've been around for the longest and they were leading for a long time. But since then, they have been passed a lot because Their model is over a year old, their best one right now, and the field has just gotten a lot better than what Midjourney offers. Their V7 model is supposed to be coming this week as we discuss this, so that could change. And then there's other competitors as well, like Flux, which is an open source model that people can build on. The thing with open source is that you have a lot more flexibility and you can do a lot of interesting things with it, like train it on a specific character or location or style or something like that. And Flux also is going to give you pretty high quality results. Their image model is still very good. Then there's Ideogram, and Ideogram is interesting because they were the first ones to be able to do a lot of text in your images. Until Ideogram came out, none of the models could really do coherent th wording at all inside of the images. It was all very garbled, and you could wouldn't would you would never get more than one or maybe two words of coherent text before Ideogram. And they are still very strong to this day in terms of text generation and realism. So that's definitely a good option. They've got a free platform as well. Google has a couple of different image generation tools. They've got Imagen, which is a lot like these other ones. It's generally very high quality in terms of realism and sort of cinematic looks. So it's gonna get nice fine details and things like that. So it's got a good image model, just like the others. But then they have native image generation, and that's a little bit deep for this video. But OpenAI does have that same thing with GPT 4o, and I can show a quick demo for that. I'll
Yeah,
share my screen
share your
here.
screen. And one thing as you're getting ready to do that, a lot of times when you go on to these other, Midjourney, Ideogram, they charge by the usage, and so you often have to have subscriptions, and you run out of credits. Whereas the new one with ChatGPT, at least at the moment, it's included. So you can generate as many images as you want, which is pretty wild. It does take a little bit longer to do those image generations, but uh, at least at the moment. But being able to create as many images as you need is a pretty great benefit.
Mhm. So one thing with the native image generation is that you can provide reference material for it to use. So we can provide elements like our logo in here and our website layout so we can get an idea of our visual identity to use. And we can tell it something like, please create an ad for Ironwood using our brand material. And since it's native image generation, that means it sort of has direct control over the output. Before, what would happen is you would um it would write a prompt for another image generation model and then give it over to that. And a lot gets lost in translation there. So you're not going to be able to get consistent characters, consistent elements, or things like that. In terms of ChatGPT specifically, there's sometimes some bugs with it since they added millions of users because of this. It got so popular because people were creating Ghibli style images or they were turning their faces into Ghibli style, and that was all over the internet. But it's a lot more practical than just that. It's looking like their servers are having issues right now, so I'm gonna generate it over on the Sora platform. Um, and that's going to, it's another place where you can use this image generation model they have. and also create videos, which we'll talk about a bit later.
Yeah, Sora is their primary video platform. But
Mhm.
then do images there as well. So that's basically the same one. If you're using images in Sora, you're doing the essentially the same thing as when you're creating images in ChatGPT.
Yes, it's essentially the same model under the hood, but it's given you this nice UI specifically for image generation instead of like talking to ChatGPT.
Hmm, hmm. And one thing this is the new thing. So literally when we were first writing our script, this didn't exist, and after we finished, it did. But one of the key differences here is once it generates an image, and I don't know like technically how it's doing it, but because it's doing it like based on the text prompt, there's a coherence between what you prompted and what it generated, so that if you then tell it, oh, I like this, but change the words to this, or add something in the corner that says, for sale, and it'll regenerate like exactly modifying that image with your new prompt. So there's a coherence between you're working with it. Whereas these other image models, you give it a prompt, it generates something, and if it's not right, try another prompt and it'll generate something. And if that's not right, try it again. There's not like a refinement of the same image the way that you can do with these new image tools
Mhm.
uh, with OpenAI.
Mhm. Another thing about this native image generation that OpenAI has is, as you can see, it's a lot slower.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
gonna take you a minute or two to generate an image compared to standard image generation, which can happen in sometimes under 10 seconds. Midjourney or some others will take a little bit longer than that, maybe 30 seconds or so. But this is definitely gonna take longer, but the quality is usually worth the wait for a complex prompt.
Yeah, while that's doing its generation, there are some other image gen players out there. And like we said, a lot of them leapfrog each other, and within the image space, it's a lot more likely that some newcomer shows up and has some great new tool that kind of launches them to the top of the list, and then somebody else comes in. With the LLMs, it tends to be a little more consistent. But there are a couple new and up and coming image gen. One was called Recraft and Reeve that we were looking at recently. With Recraft, it's got a really cool feature where if you have an image and then you provide it your logo, let's say, you can have it like overlay or integrate your logo right into that image in a really effective way. So that was something that they
Mhm.
have in particular. Um, and again, but they're always coming up with new options. So that just generated,
Mhm.
and you can see
Yeah,
text is
so it
just.
took our brand elements there, tons of text, perfectly consistent. You couldn't really get this with previous tools. Maybe Ideogram could do this after you re-roll like 10 and 20 generations.
Mm.
Um, but the logo coherence, and the amount of text and elements that it all integrated seamlessly is just really much better than we could do until now.
Mm. And if it got a few of those words wrong, you could just reprompt it and
Yeah.
make that
Hmm.
correction, and you're going to get the same thing back essentially with that correction, which is it's a really is a game changer in the image gen world.
Hmm.
So, as you can see, lots and lots of players, lots of different features, new features all the time. And that's a part of what Ironwood is doing and part of what our advisory calls are doing. We want you to be able to utilize these tools without having to spend hours and hours and hours experimenting, playing around, going down the rabbit hole. You have jobs, you have things to do besides playing with AI tools. So we're constantly evaluating, looking at benchmarks, understanding the new capabilities, how to prompt them effectively. So when we do have our calls and people bring us use cases of what they need to do, we can right away say, "Oh, you really want to be using Ideogram, or you really should be using, ChatGPT for that, or use it in this way to get what you're looking
Hmm.
for." And save you all of the time of having to figure these things out, especially since things are constantly changing, especially in the image world.
Hmm.
So let's move on to the next. We talked about LLMs, image. Let's talk about audio AIs.
Hmm. So in audio, there's a few domains. There's like text to speech to create speech generation, and then there's other things like music. So, in terms of text to speech, we have 11 Labs, which is a go-to. It was the first one with really high quality, realistic voice generation. You can type in your script and just have the AI read it out loud. It sounds very realistic and consistent. Another thing that 11 Labs offers is speech to speech. So if you have a recording of your voice and it's got a certain tone, inflection, a way to deliver it, but maybe you were sick that day
Mhm.
or you,
Maybe.
oh, maybe you were. That may or may
If
not
you
have.
watch our if you watch our video for the content generator on our website, I was
Mhm,
sick, but I recorded the voiceover. I'm like, I can't use this. I'm gonna either have to wait till I get better. But then at 11 Labs, I just uploaded it, picked a different voice, and it recorded a different voice. But like Adam was saying, like my pacing,
mhm.
inflection, everything, it sounds like me except in a different voice. It's really pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So like cleaning up voices, there's background audio, whether you're sick, or you can always replace that voice while keeping the same delivery, and that's very powerful.
Mm.
OpenAI, they have their tools in all these different domains. They've got their own text to speech, and their differentiating factor there is you can't only control what it says, but also how it says it. So you can give it a prompt for delivery, like talk like a pirate or use a Russian accent or something like that, and it'll stick to those delivery instructions. And you can really fine tune what you're looking for in terms of that. Then there's um, music generation. And in music generation, there's a couple of players. Suno is probably the most popular one. You can just type in your prompt like 90s pop rock about why oranges are the best fruit in the world, and it'll make all the lyrics for you, and it'll generate the audio with somebody singing it and music and all of those parts. And then Udio is another competitor that does the same thing there. So those are most of the players in terms of audio at the frontier there.
Hmm. Well, one other thing we talked about with 11 Labs, you could actually create a model using your own voice. So you could take, if you have other audio recordings of yourself,
Mm.
you can inform a model and then you can like replace your voice with your voice. So in my case, if I had had that model, I could have replaced my sick voice with my normal voice, right? And that would create a
Mhm.
consistency of voice over several different audio
Mhm.
features that you might be doing. So a
And
lot of pretty
another
cool.
interesting feature that 11 Labs has is sound effects. You can
Oh,
like
right.
say an explosion or a door creaks open or things like that and get nice sound effects you can use, and that's very useful too.
Nice. Great. So we have LLMs, image, audio, and let's talk about video AIs.
Mhm. So video, there's a few players. There's Sora, which we went to that platform earlier for some image generation, but it also does video. And then there's Google's VO, which is pretty state of the art there. Runway has their own model, and Juan, which is an open source one. So Sora from OpenAI was the first one that brought a lot of attention to the video generation space. It was the first one that was pretty much at all coherent when you were doing motion in terms of its physics and things like that. By like today's standards, there's a few models that are a little better than it in terms of quality, but it was really groundbreaking at the time that it was announced. It really sort of shocked the mainstream more than any other model did. Before that, we had these creepy, weird looking videos of Will Smith eating spaghetti, and it was all just
Garbage.
monstrously contorted.
Yeah.
And then Will Smith created a real video of him eating spaghetti, and he was like, AI video then, AI video now. And so Sora definitely brought it more to the mainstream, along with a lot of OpenAI's products bringing AI to the mainstream. So I can show you what that looks like a little bit here. I'll share my screen and show some Sora outputs. So in Sora, we've got different ones like this person made a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it you can loop things, blend different videos together from one frame to another. And it's pretty good with realistic motion and things like that. There's a popcorn chicken, uh, some crystal otter thing, Pepe the frog meditating and with fire in the background. Pretty much anything you can imagine you can make a video of. Um, you can also just take your still image and animate it. So I could create a video um, of a animated video at, oh, I didn't type that in. Animated ad poster. All right. And you can take this image as a start frame and then create an animation from that. You can remix things, create things on a storyboard. So if you want to make a video, you can do this sort of editor-like interface and prompt for different sections of the video. So it gives you a lot more control than some other tools. So Sora is definitely a pretty powerful tool, and it comes with your $20 ChatGPT subscription. You can just use Sora as much as you want,
Wow.
which is just pretty great that it comes with the subscription that you would already want to access OpenAI's models. So Sora is very powerful in terms of video generation, but it isn't necessarily the frontier. Google's VO is going to beat it out in terms of quality a little bit. So it's going to get more realistic motion and things like that. The world is more consistent, no weird wonky physics and things like that. I often use this for my LinkedIn and things like that. I believe this one was in a post I did this morning. And it can handle a lot more cinematic quality and things like that.
Yeah, let me
It's
actually that example one you sent me a while back, that was Google VO as well, right?
yeah.
Let me share my screen. This is kind of mind-blowing. Um, let's see, where is it? Yeah, and I need to let it share sound. Oh yeah, so this one was made with Google VO.
Pietro always had a flexible neck, just like his father and his very curious grandfather. All of
This is entirely AI generated. None of it is going to be
them
real.
fame in the village, even if it might not have been completely true. At 18, Pietro became a tennis judge, which was at least safer than his cousin doing neck tricks at the local circus, and less tiring than his nephew. Well, never mind. Older women were just laughing about it. Younger women were curious, naive, and idolizing. Many people argued about how the Pisanos did it. Some suspected special exercises. Some talked about genetics. But what no one knew is that the street in front of the Pisanos led to the home of Herr Weber, who in his adventurous years made his fortune by importing alpacas to Germany. But this would be an entirely different story. After retiring in Italy, through all the decades, he kept buying the best sports cars available from Gianni, who became a friend until the very end. When Weber went for a spirited ride, he did it right in front of the Pisano's house. Porsche, turning heads for generations.
When I'm thinking about Porsche, I'm thinking
That's
about rolling
not
motion.
AI, right?
That's
So
why
when
we took the
the
story
interview
of the
clips
Pisano
there,
family and the
even
legendary
these
flexible
making
necks.
of the
The
commercial,
scale perfectly
this is
captures
still
what we
all
wanted to
AI.
convey, how Porsche has been part
Yeah.
of families' lives for generations, creating memories and even
Yeah, the actual beside the interview shots here like that,
Lombardy.
those are the actual guy that used AI to create it.
Every stone and narrow street tells a story. The challenge was capturing that
I
perfect
wanted
blend
to
of
just
2000
show this.
village
We won't
life,
watch the whole thing
family
here.
legacy, and all
But I wanted to show that example because in some ways, like you'll think about the video stuff and it's almost just like, oh, that's interesting. Isn't that clever? But the fact that we have gone from a year ago with the Will Smith spaghetti, completely useless, interesting but useless, to 1 year later, like that was an incredibly well-produced ad. That could be an award-winning ad. And even the making of scenes being completely convincing. That's how fast AI is growing. And so that's an example that you can see in terms of video, but this is true behind the scenes. Like with LLMs, the language models, you can't always see exactly how much better they're getting, but they are. And they're getting better really at that exponential rate. So that's one of the reasons why getting up to speed on AI, understanding what's going on, and how to use it is so critical because these tools, they're amazing today and they're only getting better faster. And so it makes sense to just be trying to stay on top of this as much as you can. And that's what that we're doing to try to help.
Mhm. So VO is pretty hard to access. That guy got early access, so he was able to create that whole thing. It took a lot of video generations, of course, to get all of the shots he was looking for. But you can access it, anybody can, paid, but it's very, very expensive, like 50 cents per second of video generated. It's very much the most expensive model available
Yeah.
at the moment. So either
Yeah, at
you
the
get
moment,
in
but
early
a
access.
year from now, that level might be free,
Yeah.
and they'll be
Mhm.
doing even better things that you'll have to pay for. So,
Like we have models now that are much better than anything you could get in like 2023 that you can run for 2 cents.
right.
And yeah, so the cost definitely comes down very quickly in AI.
Mm.
But that particular model is pretty expensive at the moment. And then there's Runway. And Runway was an earlier one that came before these things like Sora and Google VO. They were sort of the people who had the first viable platform that people could like animate their images slightly. But until this or soon after Sora, none of the video generation was very good. Just yesterday, I believe, they released Gen 4, which is pretty much as good as Google VO. So these keep leapfrogging each other. It wasn't as good as the state of the art just a few days ago, but now they've caught up. It's very, very good. It's got great character consistency, things like that. They've got a lot of editing options and controls and things like that. They've got Act 1 to make a character do voice acting and lip sync that to your video along with the driving scenes. And that is just a really good all-around tool that you can access for $15 a month. So they've got a very accessible platform for video generation with a lot of control there.
Wow.
One is an open source one. Like there's open source versions of all these different models. Um, and generally the open source isn't quite as good as the stuff from the closed companies, but they are pretty close and anybody can run them. They're usually cheaper. So one is an open source video generator, not quite as good as something like VO, but still very good. A lot better than we could get 6 months ago or something like that. And it's it's open source, so people can run it on their own hardware for much cheaper than the other models. It's like what is it? Uh like 10 times cheaper than VO or something like that along those lines.
Hmm.
And you can get more flexibility because it's open source. You can train custom
Right.
styles and characters into it.
Right. Yeah, and open source is important not only because you can obviously do it, run it yourself, but with like when we were talking about the open source image generation tool Flux, when you're building automations, there's often a lot more control that you can get when you access the open source models via your API than you can even potentially get just using the front end user experiences, the tools that they give you when you're going to their native platforms. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things in terms of our services for Ironwood. Not only are we helping with the advisory side of things and helping people to keep up with what's going on and learn how to use these tools well, but we also are building out projects. So we talked about our content generator earlier, but when you integrate with these tools via APIs and you put them into automations, you can build some really amazing things. And so we're not only providing this kind of advisory service, education, training, but also when it's time to actually build out a tool where you want to use some of these open source models and put them to use for you in automations, we can build those and configure those and set them up for you. So this is the end of our first video. We wanted to just give you the lay of the land. What is this AI thing? It's essentially a brain that gets trained and then produces original content like we've been seeing. And what are the types? Large language models, image, audio, and video, and then who are the players in each of those? So I know it's a lot to cover. If you were to simplify this down, most of your time is going to be spent with these language models, and that's likely to be ChatGPT in most cases, or maybe Claude if you're concerned about security and privacy. Although, depending on the use case, you might have different instances. And in the next video, we want to talk a little bit more about some of the terminology that we use when we talk about these models, and also some of the more some of the advancements that have come in the last 6 months or so, and then just some concepts, ways of thinking about AI that go beyond just how to prompt these models and get texts and images back. So join us in the next video, and we'll cover all of those things. And we look forward to seeing you in our advisory groups.